Now we're going to talk about ECG, EKGs. Either term is fine to use. So remember, with our review of the heart, we've got a double pump. We've got the pulmonary pump that sends blood out to the lungs, where it's going to pick up oxygen and drop off carbon dioxide. And then we've got our systemic pump that's going to send the blood to the body, drops off oxygen and picks up carbon dioxide. We are also going to be pumping about 5 to 6 liters per minute, and we have about 5 to 6 liters. Again, that depends on the size of your body. So every minute your blood has traveled completely through your whole entire body. And finally, your heart has those valves there to prevent the backflow of blood. So here's another diagram of the heart. Remember, here's these little valves in here, the tricuspid and the mitral valve in between the atria and ventricles. And we've got the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve that's going to prevent blood from backflowing into the ventricles. All right, so what's the background of the ECG, EKG, and why do they have two little names for one thing? So ECG, EKG stands for electrocardiogram, or the German/Dutch word for the same activity, which is electrocardiogram. So that's why you have the two terminology, which can be used interchangeably. It's a simple, reliable, long-standing test. It's been around for a long, long time. All right, it's one of those things you send people in. It's easy to do. Results are right there, right immediately. Again, another nice one. It's still an essential assessment of the heart function. So even though we can do things using CAT scans, using this simple electrocardiogram is way cheaper and a lot quicker, because you can just get in almost the same day. So it's quick, easy, and it's cheap. So about $50 or up to get an electrocardiogram. And the person who invented this, his last name was Einthoven. He invented it in 1903. He just used 3 leads, which we'll talk about later. It's a little bit higher than that now. They use more, but he won the Nobel Prize for this in 1924. So basically, what's an ECG showing you? What is it? What is it all about? Basically, it's giving you a representation of the electrical activity of the heart. So it's going to show us how that electric current is traveling through the heart. If you remember from the earlier video, we said those SA node is that those cells, those pacemaker cells, send off an electrical signal throughout the atria, and then the node in between, the AV node, is going to be the gatekeeper, and then it's going to send that electrical signal to the ventricles to tell them when to pump. So we're going to use, it's a representative of electrical activity, and we're going to use it to find any heart irregularities. Now, again, we're not going to be cardiologists at the end of this. A cardiologist can look at an ECG strip and basically tell you where in the heart there's heart damage based on this strip. So we are, at this point, never going to get that good. Some of you will, hopefully. All right, so basically these are the leads. So, and you've probably seen it on TV shows where they come in and they hook people up with these little electrodes, and then they're connected to the machine. Some of you may have had an ECG. So these are the leads, or the electrodes that they put on you. They're just called leads, right? And then we've got a bunch that go across the chest here as well. Now what they're going to do is they're going to, I'm going to make this really, really simple. They're going to read how the electrical impulse travels through the heart. So the electrodes are basically going to tell the machine how the depolarization, or the wave of electrical activity, is going to be traveling through the heart. So we have 10 electrons placed on the chest in various areas, and of course these areas are all, you know, if you're ever doing this, they tell you exactly where to put them, so they're carefully placed. You also have one on the right arm, and the left leg. You only need 10 leads, so that's all they need to use. The ones that are on the chest are called precordial leads, and these are going to give you a direction. You're going to see the electrical movement in the coronal or the frontal direction. And then the ones that are on the limbs are going to give you, those are called the limb leads, and these are going to give you the direction that the electrical impulse is moving in, the transverse direction. So, you know, we're going to get the electrical thing, and the machine's going to do all the reading of all the electrical signals. All right, now the paper that comes out of the machine is called a tracing. So it almost looks like what you would imagine a little lie detector test looking like, right? You got all these little needles that are moving up and down, and they're going to give you these jiggly little lines that come across. It's called a 12-lead ECG because you're going to get 12 pictures that are taken, even though you're just using 10 leads. Right? So you're getting 12 pictures, which is why it's called a 12-lead ECG. Alrighty, so I'm going to show you a picture. Oh, no, not yet. So this is just kind of showing you, again, I will never ask you this kind of stuff. This is kind of showing you the direction or the vectors, the direction that the leads are reading, how they're reading the electrical signal coming towards them or going away from them. So these are, all the directions that they're in. And again, this is showing you, so there's 3 leads, they kind of work together, and they're going to give you the direction that the wave of electricity is going from in this direction to that direction. These leads that are hooked up here are going to give you the reading, or lead 2 is going to give you the reading how the electrical signal moves in this direction. So it's all vector led. And again, I'm not going to ask you anything like that at all, but you can see here, this is going to give you the electrical signal. So the electrode is going to read the signal coming towards it and then moving away from it. So this is what the tracing looks like. All right, so it's showing you all the different directions. That's what I'm saying, like a cardiologist can look at this and they can say, oh, look at that's not quite right. He has heart damage down here in this, part of the heart because this direction isn't quite correct, or the lead isn't, not the lead, but the tracing isn't high enough, whatever it is. They're pretty incredible. So this is what a 12-lead tracing ends up looking like when it comes out of the machine. And don't worry, I'll never give you anything that's this complicated because there's no way I could even read these. All right, so here's the background again, just a little reminder. So remember that the atria are filling up with blood, all right? The SA node is getting a signal from the body saying, all right, it's time to beat. The SA node, these are the pacemaker cells. They're going to send the signal to both atria at the same time, and they're going to both squeeze at the same time, squeeze all the blood into the ventricles. Then the signal is going to get sent down to the AV node, right, which is kind of high on this diagram here, but it's fine. It's in between the atria and the ventricles. That's going to be the gatekeeper. It's going to make sure that the ventricles don't beat before they're full. And then it's going to send the electrical signals down through the ventricles through these Purkinje fibers, through the bundle of His, and then through the Purkinje fibers to make sure that the 2 ventricles are beating strongly at exactly the same time. So we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at the electrical signal that comes through here. Now, what we call that is a wave of depolarization. So normally your cells have a charge, and what we're going to be doing is changing that charge. So we're going to watch how the charge is changing from this side of the atria down to the other side of the atria, from this side of the ventricle down to the other side of the ventricle. And those leads are going to be looking at it going in this direction or in this direction. Well, a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the basics of it. So remember the sinoatrial node, the SA node, the pacemaker cells, and then those AV node. They're the other pacemaker cells in between the 2 that are going to send off the second electrical signal. All right. Oh, so I forgot this part. The SA node is also known as the sinus node. It's the pacemaker of the heart. I think I've said that about 50 times, but anyway, so you should have a diagram that kind of looks like this. Mine's a little bit fancier just because it looked better on the overhead. So we're going to look at the parts of an ECG, and then we're going to talk about how blood moves through the, or not how the blood, how the electrical signal moves through the heart again, and then come back and to refer to this. We're going to make this very, very simple. There's a little bit more information about these type of the parts of these ECGs, but we're going to keep it nice and simple for us. So the first thing here, this first little curve here, this is the P wave. So just label this little hill here as the P wave. Now the next thing that you're going to see here is we're going to have the electrical signal dip down, go up, and then back down again. This whole piece here you're going to see is really important. It's all one thing that's happening. Basically, I'll just tell you now. At this point here, right here, this is where the atria are contracting. So this is where the atria are contracting. This here, this whole, this point, this point, this point, this whole thing is showing you when the ventricles are contracting. So this has a cute little thing to it. This is the Q, so this part here is Q. That's the R, and that's the little S point, all right? So the QRS. And this whole little QRS is called the QRS complex. So this whole QRS complex is when the ventricles are contracting. Alrighty, and then the last part here, this last little wave here, this is going to be called the T wave, and this is when the ventricles are relaxing. So we've got the atria contracting, we've got the ventricles contracting, and then we've got the ventricles relaxing. Now you might say, well, when do the atria ever get to relax? Well, they do relax. They relax, their little electrical line is hidden here with the ventricle line. So they're basically contracting and then they're relaxing, but you just can't see it on the EKG reading. All right, but they are relaxing there. So P wave, QRS, and then a T wave. And like I said, there's other little blips and blobs that are on here that we're not going to worry about. If you're a hotshot cardiologist, you would be measuring these little segments in between here. You'd be measuring the time in between where Q starts and where S ends. You'd be looking at the time of the P wave. We're not going to get into any of that kind of stuff because we're not getting a degree in cardiology. So here's how the normal heart cycle goes from the electrical point of view. So the atria are filled with blood. We've already talked about this before. And then that SA node fires and it sends a wave of depolarization through both atria at exactly the same time. So the right atria and the right atria and the left atria contract, and that's going to give us our P wave. So as the electrical signal goes down, it signals those muscles to contract. So that's our right atria and our left atria contracting. That's our P wave. And then the final last bit of blood is pushed into those ventricles. And then once the ventricles, or once the AV node knows that all the blood is through there, that's going to fire now, and it's going to send a wave of depolarization down through the ventricles. And then when those ventricles contract, this is going to be our QRS complex. So then at the end, when those ventricles are contracting, hopefully what they've done is they've pushed every last bit of blood out to the lungs or to the body, depending on where it goes. And then your last little wave that you see there is going to be your T wave, and that's when your ventricles are relaxing or repolarizing to what they started off with. Right, so I've got this diagram again just because I can't flip back and forth on this. So again, we've got the P wave here, so that's when the atria are contracting. Then we've got our QRS complex, that's when our ventricles are contracting. So this was filled with blood before, right here, at this point right here, it's still filled, the atria is still filled with blood. Then bam, the SA node fires. These guys contract, push all the blood into, so at this point at the end of our P wave here, all the blood should totally be into the ventricles. And then at this point here, the SA node says, great, we're full, it's time to push out, bam. The AV node fires, ventricles push, all the blood out, bam, done. All right, and then the ventricles have their little time to relax here in the T wave. And remember, during this time when the ventricles are contracting, the atria are relaxing. Or I should say, filling back up with blood again from the body. Alrighty, so what do? So if we're reading an ECG or an EKG, we got to, again, make sure you look at the name, make sure you look at the date, and make sure you look at the time at the top of the tracing. Because you could do ECGs all day long on people, right? First thing in the morning, a couple of minutes later, if you're having a heart attack, whatever, they're going to be looking at you like constantly. So make sure you're looking at the name, date, and time. So look at the rate. We're going to do a really easy way to figure out the heart rate. Well, not quite as easy as just looking at the machine and reading the beats per minute, but we're going to look at an easy way to distinguish the heart rate. Look at the rhythm. So is the rhythm fairly rhythmic? Is the heart beating fairly steadily, or is it stopping for a little bit and then doing a couple beats and then stopping again and then one beat kind of thing? So look at the rhythm. Is there a nice steady rhythm there? This one's not going to be too important for us because we're not going to get into those, but if you remember back to the picture, you know, you have your P wave. Well, you don't want your P wave to be too small or too big. You want it to just be like a normal size P wave, right? And the same with those segments in between the P wave and the QRS. You want them to kind of be a normal size, not like really, really, really spread out and not really, really close together. You want sort of a normal sign. And of course, again, if you're a cardiologist, you probably can just look at those things and go, oh my gosh, something's wrong with this person. But you want to just kind of take a little look at those and then just kind of look at everything else. You're going to be looking at all those other, you know, tracings that are on there. Just make sure everything kind of looks, there's nothing really weird or wacky or out of place. So there's a couple ways that you can get the heart rate from looking at an ECG. So some of the ECGs have on-screen calipers. So basically here, you're just going to move the calipers and you're going to always be trying to look at the peaks. So this QRS, the R peak, you want to measure in between the two R peaks. And the on-screen calipers will do that, and then they'll just give you numbers 65.7. But again, all those machines are going to give you the blood rate, the heart rate right on there. The other thing you can do, this is like more what cardiologists would do, is they'll use manual calipers, and then they're going to go through. Each of these markings is worth like 0.4 of a second. So I used to, in the past, we used to go through and calculate what the heart rate was based on each of those little squares. And then it kind of dawned on me that it was kind of unnecessary at this point. So we don't do that anymore. But if you're a real cardiologist and you're going through here, again, like I said, they can look at these and literally find out where there's problems in the heart just by doing these little measurements in there. So you can also use manual calipers, or you can use the rule of triplicate. So on your sheet, you should have a picture that looks like this. And this is, I'm going to try to explain the rule of triplicate to you on a PowerPoint video, which is going to be a little bit harder than doing it in the classroom. And I didn't want to try to make a whole other video using a webcam because I don't have that many hours in the day to wait for it to upload. So what you're going to be looking for, again, you're going to be looking for those R peaks. You want to see those peaks just because they're easy to see. You can do them in between all these little ones too, but this is just easy. It's a nice starting point. So what you're going to look at, your tracings are divided with these great big thick lines. So it's a certain time frame in between each of these thick lines here. So what we want to do is we want to find an R peak, a peak here, the R, that's as close to that thick line as possible. So that's going to be, it's going to be kind of where we're starting, but it's not the start, it's not the actual starting point of the rule, but it's how the rule starts. So you're going to find one that sits pretty well on this line. So then starting at the next thick line, you're going to use these rules. So your first three triplicates is 300, 150, 100. So this line here is going to be labeled as 300. This line is going to be labeled as 150, and this line is going to be labeled as 100. The next three set of numbers is going to be 75, 60, and 50. All right, so let's see if I've got this on here. Alrighty, I'll look at all fancy there. Oh yeah, so here's 300. So we start at the big number here. We start at the big thick line here because this R is as close to the big line as we can get it. If you have a great big long tracing, you can probably find one that sits on the line a lot closer, but this is the little segment that I have for you guys. So we're going to start here. This is going to be your starting point, but we're going to start numbering at the next thick line. Kids always, 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 always get this wrong. Put a big star on your page. Put a big thing that says here, say, start the 300 at the next line. I would do that in class, but I'm not in class. So there's our 150 and there's our 100. So 300, 150, 100. So we haven't actually met our next peak yet, have we? So we're going to go and do our next triplicate. So our next triplicate is 75, 60, 50. So basically here, this is 75. So if this line was right here at 75 beats per minute, all right, we would be able to just easily read that. So this is just a little bit over. Maybe this person's about 77 beats per minute. It doesn't matter. We're awfully close. We're not trying to get this perfect because the machine will give us closer numbers. And again, if you're a cardiologist, you're going to measure it all out. So if you were to really, really quickly look at this person's heart rate without being able to see the number that pops up on the machine, you could look at this really quick and go, okay, 300, 150, 100, and the person is 75. Or maybe somebody hands you a tracing later on and you don't even have the machine there with you. So you could look at this really, really quickly. Now you would also look, okay, name, date, see if it's on there. And you would also have a peek and say, okay, does this look pretty rhythmical? Now this one over here looks like it's kind of sneaking in there. We're just going to ignore that. But look, we've got a pretty steady, you know, we get a beat, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So it looks pretty rhythmical if we just ignore that little guy there. All right, and there's nothing too crazy out of whack here. This probably looks fine. So this person is within our normal heartbeats, but between 60 and 100 beats per minute. So this person just has normal sinus rhythm is what we would say. All right, so that's the rule of triplicate. So let's do some numbers. Oh yeah, the other last thing on there is we could calculate it out, which we're not going to because I'm not that cruel anymore. So here's some heart rhythms. All right, or some heart rates, it should say. I don't know why it says rhythms, but our normal sinus rhythm, the rate is between 60 to 90, or 60 to 100, right? That's one of those weird numbers that comes up every now and then someone will say, oh no, it's actually 90, but you know, it really is 60 to 100. I shouldn't have had that 90 down there. An arrhythmia is anything that's an abnormal heartbeat. So if anyone says, oh, I have a heart arrhythmia, it doesn't mean there's no one set arrhythmia that is bad. There's whole different types of arrhythmias. Anything that's abnormal is an arrhythmia. So meaning lack of rhythm. So the A part here, the A means without rhythm. So this is a lack of rhythm. Okay, so sinus tachycardia is greater than 90 beats per minute. Alrighty, so change that to 100. It should say 100 beats per minute. Sinus bradycardia is under 60 beats per minute. And then a fibrillation is when the heart rate is irregular. And we're going to look at some ECGs where we do have some fibrillation. And a premature contraction is when the single heartbeat occurs too early. All right, so those are those things here. Again, I apologize for this 90. I remember I was reading something and they had said, oh, it's actually, we should be changing the numbers to 90. And then I was looking, I thought I was on the forefront of science, so I changed these. And then I completely forgot to change them back. I just looked to make sure that I had the old handout sheet here, so I was looking off that one. Okay, so change those to 100. Alrighty, so that's it for now. There's just a quiz. Those are the 2 notes for today. Talk to you later.